Okay, let me start. The cost-benefit approach in everyday language use, that's the talk of our presentation. I'm Slawomir Wacewicz. My co-author is Przemyslaw Zywiczynski over there, and a lot of that is actually joint work with the organizer of the symposium, Roland. And I've made some effort to pare it down from the original version of about 80 slides. So I hope I've been effective at that task. Those three talks, earlier three talks in the symposium, did a great job of presenting results. So this is more like a demonstration of an idea for a research program that's very, very general. So I'm hoping for a lot of feedback at the end. Okay, so that's the background information, and I hope we can start from a couple of uncontroversial assumptions. Let's quickly run through them. Humans are animals. Animals are fitness maximizing agents, which means self-interested agents. And behavior is an adaptation for maximizing fitness, not somebody else's fitness, but your own inclusive fitness. Since communication is behavior as well, it follows that communication, including human communication, should in principle be a tool for maximizing fitness. Whose fitness? Not yours, but my own fitness, inclusive fitness, all right? Behavior can be like simple behavior, like for example, foraging, where the outcome is dependent on your own behavior exclusively. Whereas in communication you have at least two players, and this moves the outcomes into the realms of game theory. And a basic principle in game theory is the principle of alignment of interest. And when you apply it to communication, you have two basic states or situations. You have alignment of interests, and you have partial conflict of interest. And of course, if you have total conflict of interest, that predicts no interaction, or communicatively, that predicts no communication at all. Right. If you have no conflict of interest, if you have alignment of interests, that predicts cooperation, including cooperative communication, like for example in bees. Right? When you have partial conflict of interest, and I would like to underscore that I don't mean total conflict of interest. No. Interests are partially aligned, partially disaligned. So I'll use the word disalignment for that. That predicts manipulative communication, and that's the situation from signaling theory, which is the paradigm approach to animal communication. Now, when we are interested in human language, we know that language is cooperative. Language is essentially cooperative communication, and we know that as a fact on very many levels, right? Starting with Grice, but also on more fundamental levels, right? The problem from that perspective is that humans have disaligned interests as social economic agents, right? My interests are not the same as your interests, right? So even in joint undertakings like this trust game, right? If we want to, that was presented in the previous talk, if we I and my collaborative partner benefit from the outcome of the game, I still have a preference that all of the profit goes to me, and the partner has the preference that all of the profit goes to them. Okay? So from this bird's eye view, we have a problem, a theoretical problem, right? So we have those two statements that are in conflict with each other, and both are factual statements about humans. Humans have disaligned interests as social and economic agents in the society, in extra-linguistic reality. But humans communicate cooperatively. Human language is cooperative to the core. Something has to give, right? And you can decide to forget about human cooperative communication. Like, for example, in decision science, like the basic approach is treat humans as economic agents, analyzing situation in terms of costs and benefits, and calculating the optimal outcome, like maximizing your returns, right? Or you can forget about this, and then you can begin to have linguistics, right? Because if you want to include that, then it's impossible to do linguistics. So linguistics basically springs from that assumption. So to restate this problem, we have social life, extra-linguistic reality, where we have humans, again as socioeconomic agents, with disaligned interests, but within that, we have communication as a special case where humans, as linguistic agents, communicative linguistic agents, behave linguistically as if they had aligned interests. So this is a huge theoretical problem to explain, and so far we only have like ex machina explanations. So this is what happens, right? Somehow this happened. We have one approach to that, we have proposed one approach to that, but it doesn't solve the problem. That's the thing, right? It just names it. We say that humans have a platform of trust that distinguishes human language from animal communication, and a lot of properties of human communication actually follow from that. So things like displacement, things like arbitrariness are ultimately consequences of communicative trust that humans have. But we are still left with this conflict, this fundamental theoretical conflict. And we thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could do this, okay? If we could eliminate it, if we could study humans as socioeconomic agents with disaligned interests, which doesn't necessarily mean conflicting, but conflicting to a certain extent, and do away with ex machina explanations and do away with communication as a special case and study human communication as, with the same tools as the rest of human social life. The only problem is that it appears to be impossible, right? It's an impossible task. Has this approach been used? It has been used recently to pockets of linguistics or pockets of language behavior. For example, to indirect speech, like strategic speaker theory by Pinker and colleagues. And we believe it is applicable to the study of linguistic politeness phenomena. So we want to start from linguistic politeness phenomena, one step at a time, and maybe try to explain linguistic politeness phenomena in terms of costs and benefits that they generate to speakers, not communicatively, not in the sense that returns, that gains are communicative, that I can understand you, you can understand me, but going beyond understanding to like real gains, real losses in actual life. Yes, so we want to explain linguistic politeness or some linguistic politeness phenomena as an evolutionary stable strategy in that sense. And we have aimed at that for a long time, and we had those ideas for a long time, but we didn't have a very clear idea of how to do this. And then this is what happened. A paper was published earlier this year in Psychological Review, which is quite well published, by Chaudhry and Lowenstein from Pennsylvania, Carnegie Mellon actually, and UPenn, called Responsibility Exchange Theory. And it is basically this. It is built around, so it is in 3 steps. The first step is theory, the second step is a model, game theoretic model, and the third step was experimental verification of some of its predictions. So quite a complex thing. I'll try to be very, very brief in explaining its kind of engine. So we have 2 steps. First, doing an action, and then speaking of an action. There are 2 people in the first step, Originator and Receiver, and they illustrated with a model situation from completing a collaborative project in an office. So I'll be the receiver. Roland will have the role of being the originator. Let's assume that we are collaborating on a project or maybe an academic presentation together, and Roland has a key idea that he contributes. So he's responsible for the doing, and I'm responsible for delivering the presentation or delivering the project, reporting it to the boss, right? The boss, Dorota will be the boss, right? And the thing is that the idea is either very good or very bad, right? And I get either blamed for it or get praised for it. So which is it? Blamed. Okay. So do you see what happens, right? Roland is the author of the action. It has either positive or negative consequences, so it generates credit or blame for the receiver. All right? So I end up with a blame that should be attributed to Roland, really. Okay? But then, after the first step of doing, we have the second step of talking, of speaking. All right? So now, the two people involved in the situation have an opportunity to redistribute the responsibility, right? So now, Roland can apologize for his bad idea, right? And if he does not do that, I might take the next step of blaming him, all right? So let's assume that the situation is not negative, but positive. It was a great idea, right? I, as the receiver, got praised for the report. Now I have the opportunity to take the first step, and I can say, thank you, it's a great idea, right? So the responsibility is reallocated from me to the actual originator of the action, all right? So Chaudhry and Loewenstein described this model: 4 communications: thanking, apologizing, bragging, blaming. And they say they are used as vehicles or tools for allocating responsibility for a positive, non-zero positive, negative outcome. Right, that's the thing. Okay. Now the crux of the model is that those communications have an influence on social image, on social currencies that are valuable to humans. First social currency is competence, the second social currency is warmth, and there is a trade-off between them, right? So when I say thank you, I make Roland appear more competent and myself less competent, okay? So I expend some of this precious currency, competence, and give it to Roland, all right? But by doing this, I also appear more warm, okay? So there is a trade-off. I lose competence, but I gain warmth, at least, by saying thank you. By blaming Roland, it's the opposite. I gain competence, I lose warmth, all right? This is captured in this table. We don't have any time to explore the details of that. There is a problem that I'll just mention briefly. Whom do I signal to if there is no one around, okay? So let's assume there are no spectators. We are alone on our own, and I still say thank you, right? So whom do I signal to? They say, you signal to the virtual spectator, right? And they don't really explain that anymore, but they motivate it convincingly, right? By reference to Goffman's theory and other research, saying that people, even on their own, behave consistently with being observed, as if they were observed. Okay, virtual spectator. Right. What do we take away from Chaudhry and Loewenstein? We take away a utility-based model of communication, right, that is rooted in actual currencies, so beyond just being understood, into an economic calculus of spending something that's socially valuable and getting something that is socially valuable. Crucially, they are able to explain why politeness is costly, right? Because we all know that being linguistically polite can give you benefits, right? But what is the cost of linguistic politeness? They say it is costly. That's why it is not cheap talk, right? Because by being linguistically polite, you lose competence. As a simplification. So what we take away is a two-factor model of social image, warmth versus competence in a trade-off. The notion of virtual spectator, which is necessary to explain situations when there are no actual observers. And we take functional operationalizations of a linguistically polite language, right? So we do not start from linguistic exponents of linguistic politeness, but rather functional categories like thanking, apologizing, and so on. Okay. Now the challenge is to build up on this theory. So we take it as a proof of concept, and maybe them showing us the way how to do that, and we want to extend it both in breadth to cover more language, not just thanking, apologizing, bragging, blaming, in a very narrow context of exchanging responsibility, but more linguistic politeness phenomena, and also in depth, right? To ground it in something that would be in currencies that are more naturalistic. Let me briefly address breadth and then more extensively address depth. So breadth. We believe that perceived competence, because it's not actual competence, it's not actual warmth. The social currencies are as they are perceived of a person, so perceived competence, perceived warmth, and the device of virtual spectator. These three constructs, when you apply them, they have predictive power well beyond the context that they define for red, right? Why is that? Because you can easily imagine the same apparatus used towards requests, right? If I say, please, could you please do something for me, right? And I use this linguistically polite language to go with my request, right? You can explain it in the same way, right? I admit my lack of competence because I can't get it myself, but I'm at least more warm toward the person, right? And the person gets perceived competence, but the person pays the actual cost of granting the request, right? So you can subsume requests, polite requests, to the same kind of analysis. Yes, and then finally, going in depth. This is much more challenging, and we have only like basic ideas of how to do this. So we would like to observe at the beginning that warmth and competence are psychological constructs. They don't talk about warmth and competence, they talk about perceived warmth and competence, which are social psychological, but they are still kind of proximate, right? Or maybe these are halfway between, not ultimate. So these are like feeling good or a raise to self-esteem, right? If somebody is linguistically polite to you, you feel better, right? But what does it give you in real life, right? How does that contribute or convert to your reproductive success, ultimately? You can root it in evolved human psychology, but then you have the question to answer: why did human psychology evolve this way, right? So for an ultimate explanation, at bottom, you need to have an ultimate. Ultimate currencies, right? So you need to have some link to reproductive success at the end of the chain. Yes, so the question is, why do people value warmth and competence in the first place? So this is the fitness consequences of behavior approach. And to restate the program now, what we want to do is we want to start with more instances of linguistic politeness, more linguistic politeness phenomena, and in the first step, reduce them, maybe not reduce, but try to explain some of them, maybe statistically, maybe not reduce, to social currencies such as competence, warmth, and maybe other currencies. But in the second step, reduce them to more proximate currencies, such as perhaps status, reciprocity, and maybe others, right? So where would we begin doing this? How would we begin our ultimate level explanations? We think that competence can be rooted in the notion of vertical social hierarchy and terms such as status and prestige, which you can treat jointly, or you can distinguish like dominance-based status from prestige-based status. And this easily links to differential reproductive success in primate societies. Warmth is more problematic, but we would like to propose to link it to trustworthiness. Following cues from Jordan and Lowenstein themselves. And the notion of virtual spectator could be reduced to gossip, right? So I inform, okay, so let's talk about this briefly. So if I just inform a virtual spectator of something, it does not produce ultimate consequences, right? But the thing is, if there is no one around beyond the two of us in a communicative situations, it's not that there's really no one around, right? There's you around, and you can later go to other people and inform them, right? So this is one possibility to reduce virtual spectator to something more, or ground this construct in something more ultimate. Okay. But when it comes to competence and warmth, we can combine them into a kind of unified explanation based or linking to theories of cooperation via reciprocity, right? And these two would predict or jointly construe your desirability as a cooperative partner, right? Because how does it work if you want to select, if you have a limited pool, like biological markets theory, you have a limited pool of potential cooperators and you want to select a cooperative partner, then basically what you do is you go by expected or utility of that cooperation, right? Expected utility for cooperation to me from cooperating with you is the total pool of resources that will be generated by us, the two of us cooperating, times the probability that the other person or partner will share, or the proportion of resources that will go to me, okay? So if that person is competent, we will generate a greater pool of resources, right? If that person is trustworthy and warm, he will share a greater proportion with me, okay? So both competence and warmth, which can be reduced to status, resource holding ability, resource gain acquisition ability, and trustworthiness, these two jointly, okay, these two jointly form your desirability as a cooperation partner. Good, and this approach creates a bunch of consequences that can be explored, and we have started exploring them, but only started to explore them, really. One interesting consequence is that competence is relatively stable, or appears to be relatively stable. So when you signal high competence or signal high status, this is relatively uniform to the entire network, right? Whereas warmth may change, well, warmth may be addressed. I can be warm to one person, but I can be very cold to another person, right? And this, on our assumptions, should be consistent with my cooperativeness towards those people, right? So I can kind of shape the links of my network of cooperation by using warmth, right? Cooperation network-wide, warmth can be diet-specific. How much time? Okay. This could also have an interesting consequence that warmth would not only be signaling to the others, but could be signaling to the cooperative partner, my readiness to engage in future cooperative interactions with you. And this can be taken further using theories from Tomasello and Pinker. But, okay, scrolling down through a lot of this, this would have one important empirical consequence. Right? Because the difference, in short, between the original Chaudhry and Lowenstein account and our account is that their account is self-sufficient, right? Because when you signal warmth, you do that at the cost of competence. You lose competence, right? So it's costly. On our account, when you signal warmth, that would be correlated to your perceived cooperativeness, there would need to be social sanctions for false signaling of warmth, right? So if I use a lot of linguistic politeness, I don't necessarily lose competence, but I kind of commit to collaborating with you in the future, and that would somehow also have to be stabilized, right? And we would need, this leads to empirical prediction that people who falsely signal, who are warm, who are very polite, but later fail to collaborate with you are somehow punished socially for that. All right, so I have to finish with this.